Then we're gonna go ahead and get started. If somebody else shows up, then we'll make fun.
Oh, there
Oh, never mind.
we
This
go.
this has got to be Kevin. With a name like Jippy, I'm assuming that's Kevin.
That's Paul.
Oh, that's Paul calling him from his phone.
So he's here on both of them?
Aren't we fancy?
I knew it was somebody in the fire department.
Okay. I'll keep an eye on who's trying to join.
Okay. Paul, you know you only get one entry in the drawing, right? Just because you showed up on 2 devices, that doesn't count.
Still can't talk to us. Oh, well.
All right, whatever. Well, so I guess real quick to recap what I just sort of mentioned a little bit. The in my efforts to do 2 different things. One is I'm hoping that you guys will ask questions rather than just stare at my picture on the screen. And then the other one is I'm hoping to sort of lead by example in the with the idea that we don't have to know everything. And so the game is if you can ask me a question that I probably should know the answer to, and I have to answer with I don't know, but I'll find out. Then 1, I'm going to find the answer for you, and then 2, we'll also reward you with whatever your beverage of choice is. So that's the idea. Now, along those lines, one thing that I think is important to understand, especially for people that are new at this, which most of you guys are, really all of you guys are. Scotty, you're probably the grand old man at 2 years. Just conceptually, something for you to get your head around is the fact that we are generalists. Okay, and what I mean by that, really every industry probably has generalists and specialists, right? And generalists know a little bit about a lot, and specialists know a lot about a little. Okay, where we get ourselves in trouble is when we are generalists and we try to pretend like we're specialists. Okay, and so just as an example, you know, if we start answering questions that we don't really know the answers to, but we kind of think we do because we know a little bit about it, then that's where we're going to get ourselves in trouble. So that's why we have a team of people like lenders and title companies and inspectors that we lean on to be our specialists. Okay. So all the stuff that you guys studied in your classes not too long ago, or Laurent, the stuff you're studying right now, you don't have to memorize that stuff, right? Nobody expects you to, there's Paul. Nobody expects you to have all that stuff committed to memory and for you to be an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to every aspect of this industry. That's not really what we do. But there are a handful of things that if you don't catch them, then nobody else will. And so like, for things that are associated with the financing, like if your knowledge isn't deep enough there, then odds are your lender is going to catch that for you, right? And same with the title company. You know, if there's something that you miss, like you don't know how to work up an affidavit of heirship, you don't need to know how to do that. Okay, we have title people for that. But there are a handful of things that if you don't catch them, then nobody's going to catch them. So that's why we want to go ahead and do classes like this to just point out some of those things that you need to be familiar with, and then the rest of it, like I said, we work as a team. You know, we'll lean on our specialists to help us out with that stuff. So again, if you if your question is like you want me to explain the details of FHA 403k financing, I don't know how to do that. And I'm not buying you a bottle of bourbon because I had to say that. But if there is something that, like I said, that we get into that there is no safety net, like if you don't catch it, nobody's going to catch it, or just general knowledge that we should have. That's really what the purpose of this class is. Okay. I don't know if I explained that terribly well. Does that make sense? Just nod. Yes. No. Got it. Okay. Terrific. So let's see if I can do this correctly. I'm gonna try to put a copy of the contract up there. Corey, can wait a second. How do I make that?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, man.
Hey, just so you know, if I drop the phone and you're looking at the ceiling, I had to answer the phone, so I'm not being rude.
Got it. Now that I put this thing up there, I don't know how to go back to work for it. Stand by. Can you guys see the screen? Yeah? Okay, great.
Yep.
We got somebody in the waiting room, and now I don't know how to go back to that to be able to let them in. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so one thing right off the bat, when I am reviewing contracts that I look for is the date at the top. You guys see that up there? Yes, okay. I can't tell you how frequently I get contracts, not necessarily that our folks have written, although it does happen occasionally, but regularly we'll get people who write contracts on out-of-date forms. Okay. Now, if you write a contract on an out-of-date form, does that mean it is not a legally binding contract? No, it doesn't mean that. But they changed these forms for a reason, and so we need to make sure that we are using the most correct up-to-date stuff. So this one right here, right at the top, is that's the 2021 contract. So that's the first thing I look at, right? As we move down, and by the way, if you guys have questions, you're gonna have to shout them out because I'm looking at a copy of the contract while I'm talking. Paragraph 2 is probably the paragraph that I wish people would pay attention to more than any other paragraph. This is the one that people just sort of gloss over, and this is important because this is what you're actually selling, right? Paragraph or 2A talks about the land. That's the actual dirt that the house sits on. But like where in the contract does it say the house actually conveys, right? That's the next paragraph. So again, I would have all of your clients read these, especially paragraph 2B and 2C. Read these two paragraphs so that they understand what it is that they're selling and what it is that they're buying. Okay. Things that frequently get missed because people don't read these paragraphs. In paragraph 2B, you see where it says mirrors. Like those convey. So like I had one not too long ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, that the people had some really nice fancy mirror in their master bathroom, and then they sold the property and they took the mirror with them because it was this framed thing that whatever, it looked like a picture, but it was the bathroom mirror. And then we ended up in a fight with the buyers because this mirror is supposed to convey. It clearly says so right there in the contract, but they didn't read that. So they took it with them, and that ended up being a problem. This I've always thought is a weird one. Mounts and brackets for televisions and speakers. So if you have a TV hanging on the wall, the TV can go with you if you're the seller. But the mount and bracket, according to the contract, is supposed to convey, right? Which I don't know too many people that want to show up to their house and that they just bought and see mounting brackets everywhere. So this is usually something that you can work out with the other side of the deal. Do you actually want us to leave this here? Most of the time, what they're going to tell you is either they want the TV and the mounting bracket, which you just work out as a non-realty item, or they're going to say, no, we want the whole thing gone, at which point you just repair the wall and then it's like that was never there. But this is a conversation you need to have, because according to the contract, mounts and brackets are supposed to convey, but a TV doesn't. So work that out ahead of time with the other party. And I guess I should back up. For paragraph 2B, we're talking about improvements, which this bold part right here, permanently installed and built-in items. Okay, so that the short version of this is, does it take tools to remove it? I think is generally the rule of thumb for whether or not this is something that should be included. Is, like I said, if it takes tools to remove, right? Let's see, let's find an example. The garage, or the plumbing and lighting fixtures, right? You can't take the ceiling fan down and take it with you, right? That conveys it's permanently installed. Okay. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about improvements, is things that it takes tools to remove. One thing that gets fought over quite a bit is the water softener system. And this is something we're going to talk about later on down at the bottom of this page also. But people will, they'll want to take their water softener with them. It's specifically spelled out as something that conveys. So if you're planning to take it with you, then you need to make arrangements for that. The other thing that happens a lot with water softener systems is that people will rent them or lease them. So they don't actually own it. And so, if the people have a water softener, ask that question. Do you own this, or do you lease it? Because if they lease it, then we have to figure out, okay, well, does the lease terminate? Like, are they going to break the lease so that it terminates on the sale of the property, and then the equipment's going to go away? And if that happens, we need to make sure that the buyers understand that that's not going to be there anymore. Or if the lease is going to continue, it's going to survive the sale, and then the new people are going to take it over. Well, then they have to be made aware of that. So these are all items to look for.
Question.
Yes.
So I was recently showing a property where the seller had a Tesla charger. And he said, obviously, I'm going to leave the charger because it's installed on my wall, but I'm taking the plug with me. So it's like, I mean, what could he do that? Because the charger is stuck to the wall, but the actual mechanism, it's like, I don't know, like a phone, like you've got the cube and then you've got the wire, right? So the cube stays, but the wire he's taking out. Like, what are the rules on that?
So I guess I would want to know what plug he was talking about. If he's talking about the plug that goes from the charger to the car.
Yes.
Yeah, so Teslas have a proprietary plug on the end of theirs. It's not just like a regular one that most generic electric cars take.
Right.
So that doesn't surprise me that he wanted to take that with him.
And that's okay, since it comes out of the plug?
So the best thing to do with that is paragraph 2D, exclusions, okay?
Okay.
All of these things in B and C, clearly it can't spell out everything under the sun, right? Like, it's not going to say Tesla plug.
Sure.
And so if you're not sure, write it in right here on 2D, exclusion. The following improvements and accessories will be retained by seller and must be removed prior to delivery or possession. And so if you write in Tesla plug right there, then you're good, right? You've made everybody aware, you know what's going on. It kind of gets back a little bit to what I was talking about being a generalist. Like we're not real estate attorneys, right? I can't give you a legal opinion on whether or not that is I suspect it's actually going to be an accessory, which we'll get to in a minute. But if you're not sure, just write it in, right there under exclusions. So good question. So I think improvements, you guys understand, permanently installed stuff. And by the way, talking about the Tesla thing, if he wanted to take that wall charger with him, he could do that too. He could just write it in under 2D, wall charger and plug.
Okay.
So even though it is permanently attached, you can still exclude it. All right, so accessories are things that are not necessarily permanently attached, but still go with the house, okay? One thing that catches people on this a lot is the refrigerator. Does anybody know refrigerator, does that convey or not?
It does not.
It does not, correct. So what about a slide-in stove? Like, because a refrigerator doesn't take tools to remove, right? You just pull it out and put it on the truck and it's gone. What about one of the slide-in stoves that doesn't take any, it's not a built-in wall oven, it's just a stove, freestanding.
Still takes a tool to connect the gas or electric or whatever it is.
You could argue the same with a refrigerator because you got to connect the water line usually if there's an ice maker. The reason that a stove doesn't convey is because it's spelled out right here as an accessory, right? Paragraph 2C, stove, okay? So, and if you read this paragraph, refrigerator's not in, neither is washing machine, dryer. So that's why you can't just take the stove with you, but you can take the fridge, okay? So another thing that catches people a lot, Trish, tell me if you've seen this one before, curtains and rods. Trish Miller.
It's right up there with mirrors from bathrooms.
Yeah. It happens fairly regularly where people will sell a house and maybe they're not trying to do anything wrong, but when they sold it, they never actually read paragraph 2 of the contract that they're using to sell it. And so maybe they're actually, they know the whole time that their curtains are supposed to stay and they're just committing grand theft curtain. But I think what happens more frequently is that people don't realize that they just sold someone else their curtains. And so they take them off the wall and take them with them. Those are supposed to convey, just like blinds, window shades, draperies, rods. So yeah, the door key, right? You wouldn't think that you'd have to spell that out in the contract. Door keys certainly aren't permanently attached to the property, but they're definitely accessories. Okay. So I'm not gonna go through every single one of these things. I think you guys probably get the point. The biggest thing is you as an agent need to read these 2 paragraphs, 2B and 2C, and be familiar with what's in there. And I always tell the client, you guys need to read these and read them to them if you don't think they're going to, because this actually spells out what you're selling and what you're buying, and a whole lot of arguments come out of people not having a good understanding of B and C.
I have another question or a comment, I guess.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So also, even though this contract spells it out, does the MLS trump that? Like, meaning if it's included in the MLS listing as part of the property, can you come back and say like, well, on the MLS, you listed that you have this as as a feature of this home, but yet you're trying to not include it?
If it's not in the contract, like nothing's going to trump the contract.
Okay.
So if you put in the contract that fridge will convey, or I'm sorry, if you put in the MLS listing that the fridge will convey, and then it's not here in the contract when you actually write it up, that what's in this contract is what matters.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. Another good question.
I'm just laughing at your big face in the picture, I'm sorry.
Okay. My head is really shiny. Actually.
It's sort of because you don't have much hair left in.
That's probably a contributing factor.
Yeah.
So paragraph 2 is your friend. Okay, become familiar with it. And then if you're not really sure, write it in as an exclusion. Okay, and if you don't have enough room on this line, then this is something that you can put in special provisions. Is Tesla wall charger is an accessory and will convey on sale or whatever.
Hey Phil, I got a question.
Yeah.
Is Ring doorbells considered a security equipment, so it would convey like a door, the Ring doorbells and the cameras and stuff that come with it?
That I don't know if you would technically call that security equipment or not, but it is permanently attached to the house, so I would call that an improvement. So if they want to take their Ring doorbell with them, then I would write it up as an exclusion. Or the easiest thing to do is just take that thing off of there and put a regular doorbell on before you even list the property. So yeah, whether it's technically considered a security system or not, I would say that's either going to be an improvement or an accessory, one or the other. So if it's not going to convey, list it as an exclusion, or just take it off of there before you list it. Make sense? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I got you. Thank you. For
Okay.
Y'all did your homework. I'm excited. Trying to stop you.
Okay, so scrolling down, I mean, I think paragraph 3 is pretty straightforward. We don't need to go over that unless somebody has a question. Paragraph 4 on leases, a big one that if there are any leases associated with this property, something for you to know as an agent is that this line right here, after the effective date, seller may not, without buyer's written consent, create a new lease, amend an existing lease, or convey any interest in the property. So that means, you know, if there's tenants that are in place and they decide that they want, you can't, you know, be like, oh, well, these are really nice tenants, so 2 days before closing, I'm going to sign a new lease with them for another 2 years at really low rent, right? You can't do that. You cannot mess with anything in the leases and you can't sign any new leases after this contract has been executed. Okay. So be familiar with this, understand that if there's a lease, it needs to stay as it was on this, when this went, you know, when this contract was executed, or if there is some reason why you need to change it, just communicate with the other party and work it out. So I wanted to point out that was in there. Down here, these are relatively new things. This paragraph 4, the way it's written. The residential leases, you will have to provide them to the buyers if you are the listing agent, and you are within your right to ask for them if you are the buyer's agent. And then fixture leases. Okay, this goes back a little bit to what we talked about before with the water softeners. Water softeners and solar panels are big things where there's they're kind of expensive sometimes to put in. And so rather than pay for the whole thing, it's a whole lot cheaper to put it in if you just sign a lease on it. But you know, if that's in place, then we need to make sure that everybody's aware of how that's going to be handled. Like, is the equipment going to be removed prior to closing? Is this lease going to survive the sale, and now the new folks are responsible for it, or whatever? So that's you know, these fixture leases. Ask that question. You know, if people have a water softener, if they have a propane tank or whatever that they don't own, then that needs to be worked out. Okay. The rest of this stuff, I think, is probably not going to be super relevant. You guys, I'm sure, I hope, know about this one, that you have 3 days to drop off earnest money and option money. That's 3 calendar days. That's not 3 business days. So yeah, this is a big one. And obviously, you know, if you sign the contract on, you know, Friday evening, right before Memorial Day weekend, you know, if the 3rd day ends on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, then the time is extended until the end of the next business day, right? So again, don't get yourself in trouble by missing those dates. And then there is some conflicting information out there about how people want you to, some people say you need to pay the option money and the earnest money in 2 different checks. It really doesn't matter. It says right here in the contract that they can be paid separately or combined in a single payment. So whatever you or your clients prefer is fine. Skipping down to paragraph 5B, the termination option. This is another thing that catches people sometimes is they will want to grant an option period for free. And you cannot do that. Okay, there has to be nominal consideration, this phrase right here, for nominal consideration, the receipt of which seller acknowledges and buyer agrees to pay, blah, 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 blah. That means if they're not paying actual money for it, then they don't get an option period. So even if you're trying to be nice as a listing agent and then let them have it for free, that doesn't work. Okay, put money in it. And that is even restated a little bit lower somewhere. Paragraph D. If no dollar amount is stated in the option fee, or if buyer fails to deliver the option fee by the time required, the buyer shall not have the unrestricted right to terminate. So it can't be zero. All right. Somebody have a question?
I raised my hand.
Just
I know that I should know this, so just know that I know I should know this, but I don't still.
That's why we're doing this.
Is earnest money, when is earnest money ever returned? Because I thought once you give your earnest money, if you terminate, period, you lose it.
Not true. That's
When do they get it back?
there's all kinds of reasons why you could get it back. So what the earnest money is for is it is your promise as a buyer to follow the contract. Okay. And so there's plenty of reasons in the contract why you can get your earnest money back. A great example we just talked about is the option money, right? If you give option money and earnest money, you have a 7-day option. 3 days into the contract, you decide I don't want to buy this house anymore. You can terminate because you're in your option period. And yeah, you're gonna lose your option money, but that earnest money comes back to you.
Okay.
Right? That's just one example. The third-party financing addendum is another one. You know, it spells out if I cannot secure the financing, you know, according to these terms, then I can still walk away. I'm going to get my earnest money back.
Okay.
Right? So there's several reasons. Let's see, that covers that. Paragraph 6. So I'm not going to go too deep into this one because we've got a class coming up on title commitments and stuff like that. So I don't want to steal their thunder. So I'm just going to gloss over that one unless you guys have any questions about it. Feel free to shout them out if you do. If not, then we're going to move on to the survey paragraph, subparagraph C. The big thing I want to point out in this one, it's in bold, but people still screw it up.
I screwed it up.
Well, I guess there's really two things I want to mention in here. One is that the big thing is that if seller fails to furnish the existing survey or affidavit within the time prescribed, buyer shall obtain a new survey at seller's expense. So down underneath that, it says, basically what this option is for is we're going to use an existing survey. And if for some reason that survey isn't adequate, then somebody's going to have to pay for a new one. And we check who that is down here where it says seller and buyer. So we're going to use the existing survey and it's no good. So we want the seller to pay for a new one. Then we check the seller box. We want the buyer to pay for a new one. We check the buyer box. It doesn't matter which of these you check if the seller never turns the survey in. Okay, by using this box, you're saying we have an existing survey, and then the seller is going to turn that in. If the seller never turns it in the first place, then it's on the seller to provide a new one. Okay, the buyer gets to order a new one on at the seller's expense.
Hey, Phil.
Yes, sir.
And Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were able to waive the survey on that last contract, right? On Gene's contract.
Yes, the buyer waived it.
Yeah, so we did not have to provide a survey.
Corey looks very concerned by that.
Yeah, so the buyer waived, the buyer said we just don't want a survey.
It was a townhome, but they said, yeah, they didn't care about the survey. So, you know, the land really wasn't an issue. So.
Were they paying cash?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, so,
If you're paying
yeah, the
cash,
title office was the same. They were okay without having one as well.
okay. Yeah, if you're paying cash, then that frees you up to do all kinds of fun stuff. If you're, I'm a little bit surprised they were able to get a title policy with no survey, but you're definitely not gonna get a loan without a survey. So,
Yeah, and it was a little confusing because it doesn't state that anywhere in the contract. You know, it says it'll be provided.
okay, well, if you manage to, is this deal already closed?
Yes.
Okay, good job. Megan, what was your question?
I was gonna ask Jen if this is what she was talking about, because the deal that we worked on together, my buyers paid for that survey. And I just realized that they didn't have to, that since your seller Matt didn't provide one, then he needed to buy one instead of my buyers.
It depends on how we had it checked. So on this one, and I have to pull a contract, Megan, I don't remember. So here's the fun part. The way that Megan came to work with us is we worked either side of a deal. And it was an absolute shit show, but she handled it amazingly. So now she's with us. So I believe on that one, we put the seller, or we put box 1, but buyer shall obtain a new survey at buyer's expense. No later
Oh,
than
okay.
prior to closing. But I'll check it.
So if
I was just
the
curious.
seller actually turned it in and it was no good, then it's on the buyer to, if you guys had checked the buyer's box.
Okay.
But if they don't turn it in at all, then it's on the seller regardless of what box you check.
Okay.
Well, they don't look.
So just again, because I know several of y'all are new, there is an affidavit that goes with these surveys if you're going to use an existing one. It's called a T47. And what the T47 says is that the survey is going to tell us is a snapshot of what that property looked like on June 12th of 1984 when that survey was done. Okay. And so what you're providing, the affidavit, is you're saying since June 12th of 1984 to now, you have to list the things that have changed. Okay. Now you don't have to list, we painted the house blue. Okay. It's just stuff that would appear on the survey. So if you put in a pool or a deck or something like that, then you're going to have to list that on the affidavit. I'm happy to answer questions about the affidavit if you'd like, but it'll be easier and it'll make more sense if we're just explaining when the time comes. I'll just explain the affidavit to you if you're not clear. But before we move on from this paragraph, this actually happens more than you might think. Again, going back to this bold statement, if seller fails to furnish the existing survey or affidavit within the time prescribed. So the time prescribed is going to be up here in this blank. So within 3 days, let's say, or 5 days, whatever it is you guys write in there. That's when they have to turn it in. So you will actually get people that will turn in either the survey or the affidavit, but not both. And then think that they have satisfied this requirement because it says if seller fails to furnish the existing survey or affidavit, right? That doesn't mean that you only have to provide one or the other and you're good. Okay, you have to provide both by that date. Okay, so the fact that it says or, that just means if you didn't turn in one or the other, then you have screwed up. It doesn't mean that you only have to turn in the survey and then you never turn in the affidavit, but that's okay.
And the affidavit has to be notarized. You can't just turn in a T47 without a notarized signature.
Yeah, we've had that too, where the agent will pencil whip an affidavit and send it over and be like, look, here's the affidavit. Doesn't count, right? It has to be signed by the seller and it has to be notarized. So yeah, like I said, I don't mean to turn this into a T47 class. We'll get into the details of that. If you guys have questions, I'll show you how to do it all. But again, those are two things that people screw up pretty regularly. Is they'll check this box saying that they will use the existing survey and then they never turn in the existing survey, right? So especially if you're the listing agent, if you're planning on checking this box, then make sure they have the survey and do it before you even list it, right? Don't wait until it's like, okay, you have 2 days, according to the contract, to turn in the survey and the affidavit. And then they're like, oh yeah, I think that's in storage somewhere or whatever, right? Get the survey and the affidavit both done before you even list it, right? Have copies of them, and it's best if you just put it on the list. It makes you look really good. So have we beaten that to death? Everybody understand? Hope so. Okay. Well then, moving down, this blank right here, this is the paragraph on objections, the things that, you know, as we're doing our due diligence, checking out the property, trying to make sure that we're getting what we think we're getting. That if something comes up in the title commitment, or if you do get a chance to look at that survey and it looks, there's something on there that wasn't supposed to be, the buyer can object. This line right here, buyer must object the earlier of either the closing date or blank days after the buyer receives the commitment. Okay. So if you are the listing agent and you didn't put anything in this blank number of days, and that means the buyer has all the way up to the closing date to object to something. So if something comes back in the title commitment that they read through and they don't like, they can wait 2 months and then the day before closing object to it because you didn't put a number of days in this blank, right? So I would normally put 3 or 5 or something like that. Right? Give them a few, but it doesn't need to be 30. Okay, so don't leave this date blank. You good with that? I tend to get wordy, so I'm trying to move through this fairly quickly.
Yeah.
All right. Getting too deep into this
You were a
stuff.
preacher in your former life.
Do what?
You
My
must have been a
grandpa-
preacher in your former life.
Yeah, I think the church would catch on fire if I walked into it now.
So I said former life.
Right. Let's see. Okay, we're getting to the part on what's that part? Let's see. Okay, statutory tax districts. Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm gonna lump 2 of these together and then I'm gonna let her take over. Paragraph down here, whatever we're on, 6E3, statutory tax districts, okay? If the property is situated in a utility or other statutorily created district providing water, sewer, drainage, or flood control facilities, blah, 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 blah. There's a notice that you have to provide if they are in a statutory tax district. That notice, let's see, seller to deliver and buyer to sign, doesn't say may, it says the seller will deliver and the buyer will sign the statutory notice relating to the tax rate, bonded indebtedness, and standby fee of the district prior to final execution of this contract. So that doesn't mean 60 days from now when we close, right? Although they're probably gonna make you sign it again there. It says prior to execution of this contract. All right, so that's statutory tax districts, and then you get the same thing a little bit further down where we get to, where is it? 7, public improvement districts. If the buyer is in a public improvement district, seller must give buyer written notice as required by the property code. An addendum containing the required notice shall be attached to this contract. So statutory tax districts and property improvement districts are things that people gloss over a lot, but the contract requires that they be included. So this is a fairly new thing. So I'm going to let Jen take over and sort of explain how to figure this out, and then we'll move on a little bit.
All right, guys, how many of you have had contracts that you had to get a MUD notice signed and added to the contract? Yeah, me, Megan, the rest of you are lying. You did at some point, I'm confident. So, yes, Paul. So this tends to get skipped over because it feels scary and weird. Like, how am I as an agent supposed to know if my listing needs to provide this notice, and as an agent, if my buyers are supposed to sign this notice. It feels super weird at the beginning, but it's really actually very easy to find out. I'm going to show you guys, because if you are a listing agent, you need to include this notice and all of your paperwork on the MLS. If you are a buyer's agent, you need to make sure that you have this before you execute a contract. Just like the seller's disclosure, you want to have it before you execute the contract. So it's actually really easy to find out if one is required. What you're going to do is if you go to the tax records, can you guys see the tax records that I just pulled up?
Yep.
Okay, I'm just making sure because I wasn't sure if Phil shared the document or if he shared the screen. If you go to tax records, the Hayes CAD, Travis CAD, Williamson CAD, wherever, and you scroll down to the bottom where it says property taxing jurisdiction. If you keep going just below that, nope, not below that, right here. It is property taxing jurisdiction. It's going to tell you right here. So you can see this is Sunfield. Anybody that's practicing in Buda know that you're going to have this every time you're dealing with a house in Sunfield. But you're going to see in this one, Sunfield mud number 3, which is an indication that we need the mud notice. And then special road here is the second one. If you see something funny that talks about special road or public utility or public improvement or anything that's not a mud and not a school, you need to call the county and see if something that is required. In the next 6 months or so, all of these public improvement districts are going to be required to put all of the information that is required on their website. So if you go look, you look here, it's going to say Sunfield mud number 3. You Google Sunfield mud number 3. It's all going to be right there. Right now, it's a little fuzzier. It's not as easy to find. So I recommend calling either your title company or calling the county to get that information. Now, if you are the listing agent, you absolutely want to have this beforehand, before you put your listing up. Because if this is required and you as the listing agent do not provide it and you go under contract, your buyers have an automatic out up until closing. They can get out of this contract if you did not give them this ahead of time. So if you're representing the buyer, it's great because you got a loophole in the contract if you need it. But as a listing agent, you have absolutely got to make sure that you have this. So first time you do a listing, if you aren't able to find it, call one of us and we'll help you guys through it. Cool? Did I both scare you and make you feel comforted that it's easy to find? Cheryl saying yeah.
I'm more afraid of how do I explain that to my clients? Because
just like you would with the seller's disclosure, there is information we have to tell potential buyers about the property. If there are damages to the home, they need to know about it ahead of time. If there are taxes that they are paying, it's already included in their taxes, but we need to notify the potential buyers. This is something that's included in your taxes. Which if you've ever done the mud tax, that's all it is. It's a one-page notice that says, hey, by the way, you're in a mud. Your taxes are, 30 cents per 10,000 or whatever higher. Here's where you find the information. But by the way, it's already baked into the numbers we already gave you for your taxes. This stuff is already baked in, but we have to notify them of what it's for.
But Jen, if in the notice, whenever, because I've had this happen multiple times.
Yeah.
In the notice, it says basically, if you're in a mud, the district can charge you X amount of money. And then my clients freak out. They're like, what do you mean? So they can just tax us extra? And I'm like, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And if your clients aren't okay with that, we need to narrow their searches to areas that don't have muds.
Okay.
Because yes, they can have taxes levied against them later down the road if they're in a mud or they're in a special utility district, and we want to make sure that they know that.
Well, I also include too, to highlight that it also says if they have a surplus of tax money that they do not need, that they can get a refund. So
that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you think they're freaked out by being notified of that, wait until you don't notify them and then they get an assessment levied against them. Yeah. and then they find out that you were legally required to notify them and you didn't. See where I'm going with that?
Yeah, lawsuit.
Anyway, so that's, I know a lot of this contract is like boilerplate, blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, again, we're trying to pick out the things that people screw up a lot, and that's a couple of things that get lost really easy. But it does go back to what I was saying at the beginning about being generalists, not specialists. You don't need to have memorized every single document that needs to, you know, you don't need to just have them in your back pocket that you can pull out and hand to anybody. But you need to know that there are documents that are required sometimes, and you need to know where to find them. So, I mean, we can call our title companies for this, and we can get help, but nobody's going to catch that if you didn't at least know about it on the front end and make some effort to get that requirement satisfied. So getting back to the contract itself, and I'm going to try to speed up a little bit because I realize we've almost been going for an hour. I'm impressed that you guys haven't fallen asleep yet. Let's see. Talking about paragraph 7. So one thing that sort of annoys me is when people write extra stuff into contracts that don't have to be there. One example that happens a lot is people will, I'm gonna skip ahead and I'm gonna go back for a second. But right here in paragraph 7D, these two boxes right here, okay, buyer accepts the property as is, which is the one you check most of the time. And then underneath that, buyer accepts the property as is, provided seller at seller's expense shall complete the following specific repairs and treatments. Okay. Most of the time when we write these contracts, we're checking the box that says as is. Okay. And all that means is that we're not asking our sellers to do any repairs right now. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that we can't ask them to do repairs in the future. Okay, it even says that right under here. Do not insert general phrases such as subject to inspection that do not identify specific repairs and treatments. Some people, their buyers will freak out and say, well, I don't want to sign a contract that says I'm accepting it as is when after I get my inspections, I might want them to fix the air conditioner or recaulk the windows. Okay, if you're not going to ask them to do that stuff right now, then you just check as is. Okay, you can still go back later and ask for more stuff. And that's what I was going to go back to, which is up here in this buyer's agreement to accept the property as is under paragraph 7D, 1 or 2 does not preclude buyer from inspecting the property under paragraph 7A for negotiating repairs or treatments in subsequent amendment or from terminating this contract during the option period. Okay. So that's just something to have your clients read this if they start freaking out about the word as is, okay, or words. All right, so speeding through a couple more of these. In paragraph F, it talks about all required permits must be obtained and repairs and treatments must be performed by persons who are licensed to provide such repairs or treatments, or if no license is required by law, are commercially engaged in the trade of providing such repairs and treatments. Okay, so where this comes up is you'll have a seller and the buyer will give them a repair amendment, and it says that we want GFCIs added to the outlets in the bathroom. And then they will submit a bid from an electrician saying that they're going to do that for $500. And your buyer's like, I watch HGTV all day long. I know how to change out an outlet and I'll just put it in myself. And so they say that I'm not going to pay you the money for that. I'm going to have the repairs done myself, and they do it. Okay. Most of the time, our buyer is not licensed to provide such repairs or treatments. Okay. So having your seller do repairs that he's not licensed to do or she's not licensed to do is a violation of the contract. And then it even says in here, like if it says caulk the windows, right? Well, I can caulk the windows. If no license is required by law, then they are commercially engaged in the trade of providing such repairs and treatments, right? So is your seller a professional window caulker who is commercially engaged in the trade of providing such repairs? Probably not. Okay, so that's why whenever we're negotiating repairs, I always like to just do money, right? It makes it so much easier, right? Give them $500 and then it's just done. There's nobody that can argue with it. And then you don't have to overpay a handyman to come do some silly thing that you could do yourself. Okay, so know that these things are in here. And if your seller is pounding their fist on the table, insisting that that I'm a DIY superstar and I'm going to do this myself, then just know that tell them you are violating the contract. Okay. And then let's see. I want to read this whole thing to you. The disclosures.
Megan, you need more, babe. Go get it. She's trying to. Me too.
Right.
I'm out too.
Yeah, I'm close. Like, we may have to.
We need a halftime here. Man.
Intermission.
Tell you what, when we get done with the contract, we will take a 3-minute break before we get to the addendum. So, all right, I won't get too deep into that. Let's see. All right, this sets me up for something I want to talk about later. Paragraph 9, the closing date. Okay. If either party fails to close the sale by the closing date, the non-defaulting party may exercise the remedies contained in paragraph 15, right? Paragraph 15 is the default paragraph, which we're going to get to here in a little bit. That's supposed to be very intimidating, right? There's supposed to be scary music playing anytime anybody talks about paragraph 15. Okay, when we actually read paragraph 15, you're going to be very disappointed as to what it says. It's not nearly the hammer that we wish it was. But the important thing when talking about closing dates is that all these paragraphs that talk about by X date something must happen, there's a line in there that says time is of the essence, which means if it says within 5 days, it doesn't mean within 6 days, right? It means 5 days. But those dates are strictly adhered to. It doesn't say that for a closing date. So if somebody is delayed by 1 day, then it gets murky when we talk about where we go from here. Like, is the contract automatically terminated? That's one of those that we would want to call in our specialists, right? That's when we want to talk to a real estate attorney, like, where do we go from here? Because it's not as cut and dry as it would be as if time is of the essence in this paragraph. Okay, so just again, know that closing dates can be tricky if somebody only misses it by a day or something like that. So scrolling past that, this is just something I wanted to mention real quick because it's fairly new. It talks about smart devices. Scotty, you were talking earlier about Ring doorbells. This is one, you have to deliver the buyer written information containing all the access codes, usernames, passwords, and blah, blah, blah. So if you use the same passcode for everything, you may want to change it on your Ring doorbell before you hand it over to the buyer. And then part 2 says terminate and remove all access and connections to the improvements and accessories from the seller's personal devices, including but not limited to phones and computers. So you can't keep the pool controls on your phone and mess with their, turn their lights on and off in the pool. You can't creep on them and keep the login
come on.
for their security cameras and stuff, right? You're supposed to hand over all that stuff, and then you're supposed to terminate your own access. So are you going to know if your sellers actually do that or not? Probably not, but it is in there. Okay. So be aware of that. Special provisions. If you want to see me get heart palpitations, write something in special provisions. Okay. I don't like this paragraph, but there are times when it's appropriate. I talked about something earlier. Like if you don't have room for something that goes somewhere else in the contract, you can use this. The
Our
biggest
classes
thing-
all said pretty much never write anything in there because you're writing law and we don't write law.
kind of are, right? The biggest thing that we want to avoid, and this doesn't accomplish everything, but the number one thing that people screw up with this paragraph is this is to make statements, okay? It's not to make clauses, okay? And a clause is like an if-then type of thing. Like seller will do this unless seller decides not to, and then buyer will in turn do that, which is like if, then, this, that, right? If you need to write wall charger is considered an improvement and will convey on sale, fine. Okay, that's a statement. That's not a clause. All right. If there's an if then you're probably screwing up. All right. That's not what we use this for. So people will play it fast and loose in special provisions. We don't do that. One thing that I wish was in this contract and isn't is a statement that says something to the effect of seller will remove all trash and personal belongings prior to close or something like that. Because people are awful and they will leave the property a shithole. Like they'll leave all their stuff everywhere. They'll trash the place before they leave. And there's nothing in the contract that says they have to get all their stuff out before they move. They can just totally leave that and drop it on you. Corey, you dealt with that. So a statement that says all trash and personal belongings shall be removed prior, by seller prior to closing or something like that. I don't have a problem with that. If you want to include something like that, maybe you don't necessarily include it on every one, but if you look around and you're like, yeah, this is a little sketch, then yeah, you can write that in. Now, if they don't do it, you probably have to sue them, and it wouldn't be us doing it; it would be the buyers. But at least it's in there. So that's an example of a statement that you could include if you felt like you needed to. Scrolling past that, okay, here's paragraph 15. Since this one is mentioned so many times, we're just going to read it. And I think you guys will agree that it is not nearly the hammer that we all kind of assume it is. If buyer fails to comply with this contract, buyer will be in default and seller may A, enforce specific performance, which specific performance means we're going to sue you and make you do what you said you were going to do. Which if we're suing the buyer, that means we're going to sue you and make you buy the house. Enforce specific performance and seek such other relief as may be provided by law or both, right? So you can sue them, is what one option is. B, terminate this contract and receive the earnest money as liquidated damages, thereby releasing both parties from the contract. So you can sue them, or you can terminate the contract and get the earnest money, right? And then it's the same thing for the seller. If seller fails to comply with this contract, seller will be in default and buyer may A, enforce specific performance, blah, 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 or B, terminate the contract and receive the earnest money. So that's really all paragraph 15 is it says you can sue them or you can get the earnest money and call it good. Okay. Now, for most of us, if we get to this point, the earnest money is not going to be good enough, right? If somebody leaves you at the altar and they're saying, fine, you can keep my, $2,500 in earnest money. You're probably not going to be satisfied with that. But your really only other alternative is going to be to sue. And so that's a decision that your clients are going to have to make. Do they want to pursue that or do they not? Okay.
And that is how Jen and I became best friends.
Right. So
Like, this shit's gonna get real.
yeah, I wish paragraph 15 was 3 times as long as it is and said that, if this happens, then that happens. And if this happens, then that happens. But it's really not in there. It basically just says you can sue them or you can get the earnest money. And if you accept the earnest money, then this is over.
14 got really ugly for us.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and Trish Morrison knows about that one too, right? You remember that, Paul, when that house Homer was buying burned?
Crap
But-
happened.
Anyway, so let's see. We can talk about escrow. I'm going to summarize this real quick and just say this paragraph in here that talks about demand. If a contract gets terminated and both sides think they deserve the earnest money, that's where it can get ugly, right? So the escrow agent, meaning the title company, is going to send you out a thing saying, I need you to sign this document that says who gets the earnest money. And either nobody's going to sign it, or one's going to sign a copy that says they get it, and the other one's going to sign a copy that says they get it. Nobody's going to actually agree to it, right? So they're going to fight it. This part here in demand says, if either party fails to execute the release, either party may make a written demand to the escrow agent for the earnest money. If only one party makes the written demand for the earnest money, escrow agent shall promptly provide a copy of the demand to the other party. If escrow agent does not receive written objection to the demand from the other party within 15 days, escrow agent may disperse the earnest money to the party making the demand. So if you're in an escrow money fight and the title company says to you in writing, well, the other folks are demanding the earnest money, and you reply over the phone, well, damn right, we are too, right? That's not, they're not just giving you an FYI, okay? They're telling you that they have made a demand and now there's a clock ticking. And if you don't either make another written demand, then 15 days is gonna go by and they're gonna give the earnest money to the other folks because you didn't do your part, okay? So again, you don't have to memorize this paragraph, but just know that it's there, right? And if somebody makes a formal demand for the earnest money, that starts a 15-day clock, okay? And then real quick, there is another line in here that talks about any party who wrongfully fails or refuses to sign a lease of its acceptable to the escrow agent within 7 days of the receipt will be liable to the other party for damages, the earnest money, and reasonable attorney's fees. So if you're just being an ass and you don't want to sign this thing just because you want to make their life difficult, they can sue you, and you're on the hook for not only the earnest money but their attorney's fees. So think about that before you advise your client to, or if you don't want to sign it, don't sign it. Anyway, and then E right here, notices. This is setting me up for something we're going to talk about here in a minute. Escrow agents' notices will be effective when sent in compliance with paragraph 21. Okay. Skipping to paragraph 21, that's this blank where it talks about where the buyer's contact information goes and where the seller's contact information goes. People leave these blank all the time. Okay. And it's laziness is the only reason that doesn't go in there. You need to put their information in, okay? Because if you don't put them in there, then official notices are going to go to you, okay? And then if it goes to your junk folder and you forget to forward it to them, to your clients, and then it's something important like a demand for earnest money, we've got a problem now. Okay, so put their information in here, all right? It can be email or whatever. It doesn't have to necessarily be their physical address if they would rather that wasn't in there. But make sure these are filled in because we want the official notices to be sent to them, not to us. Okay, we got.
So Phil, I don't know if there's an official way, but so when we receive an offer, a lot of times it doesn't have half of it filled in, the seller's information, like if we're listing. Are we supposed to fill that in? I mean, I'd ask them for that information to fill it in.
I mean, it's nice. Like you can ask. I whenever I was doing deals of my own, I would do it that way. I would call a listing agent and say, "Hey, do you have contact information you want me to put in paragraph 21?" That's a courtesy. That
otherwise, if we change this, we have to initial it and blah blah blah, right?
Yeah, if it's not in there, then you gotta change it. Okay. Megan, did you have a question too?
I do. I've had on more than one occasion the seller's agent not wanting to provide the seller's information because it's on the contract that my buyer is then going to see. And I've had buyers that were like, well, I want to call the seller and ask them this. And I'm just like, well, that's what my job is for. And so, I mean, I honestly have not even wanted to put the seller's information because I don't want to look like an asshole for my buyer trying to email and call the seller. And that literally did happen. Like, he ended up emailing the seller somehow. I don't know if they were copied in a correspondence or something, but he started emailing the seller before the deal was done, asking him all these questions. So what do you advise on that situation?
I mean, that is, I've heard the same thing too. And I just explained to them that we have to put your information in. You know, I've never come across one where I couldn't talk them into it.
Well, I would think you could always tell your seller that they may receive emails from a person, but they don't have to answer to go through you if you don't want to answer them, or something like that. Maybe make them feel more comfortable.
Well, I was on the other end of it. So to me, it was like, sorry, seller agent, my buyer is probably going to harass your seller because he doesn't understand that he's not supposed to. Yeah, I haven't had a listing to deal with that yet, but anyway.
Yeah, well, and the unfortunate part is, like, you can't order, like, if your client wants to email them directly, like, you can tell them that's really not how this gets done, like you're supposed to. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're the boss. So I mean, we can't order them to not do that. But that isn't how we typically operate.
I know it's a little off subject, but that being said, if the deal is done, is it proper protocol to tell your buyers, hey, you know I'm no longer involved in this transaction, it is closed. If you have any information to ask about the property, just contact the seller themselves?
I don't know that you can't do that, but I mean, it's frequently happen. Like, we try to say that we're going to be your real estate agent for life, not for just this deal. And so it would, I mean, you can do that, but you know, we generally try to help people with stuff like that, just as part of you know, continuing to help them with their real estate stuff.
All right.
But if you're done with them, yeah, you can call them. There's no says you got to do that.
Okay.
Okay, so just to wrap up the contract real quick, these down here, the only thing that I really see people screw up on these are all the different addenda that it's not all of them. It's some of the different addenda that could be attached to these contracts. If you're going to attach something to the contract, it has to be here. Okay, like, it has to be checked in one of these boxes or written in under other. All right. So if you include a third-party financing addendum, but you don't check this little box, then it's not technically included. Okay. So this spells out what is attached to the contract besides just the contract itself. So the one that annoys me is that non-realty items addendum is not in here.
That drives me nuts.
Somehow or another, addendum for property located seaward of the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway made it in, but non-realty did not. So that's annoying. So you might have to just check this and write in non-realty.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
On our townhome, so they were subject to POA, the Property Owners Association, and an HOA for the townhome. So in that situation, is one box checked, or do you put one in the other? There were two separate organizations.
The only addendum I'm familiar with is addendum for property subject to mandatory association membership in a property owners association. So you can check that for sure. And then if there is another one, then you can check other and write it in. But
Okay.
if we're talking about two different documents. Then
Yeah,
they
it's
would
two
both
different
need-
organizations.
Okay, then yeah, they
They
both
were-
need to be checked. So like I said, without digging too deep into this, the thing that makes us look unprofessional and drives me crazy is when people they check other and write third-party financing, right? It's right here. You don't have to check, you don't have to write it in as other if there's already a checkbox for it. Okay, now is it any more or less legal if you check other and then write it in? No, it's just a pet peeve of mine and it makes us look bad. If you're including a seller's temporary residential lease, then just check this. Don't write in seller's temporary residential lease. Does that make sense?
Redundancy.
That's just my obsessive compulsive disorder that drives me nuts when people do it. And then this is another thing that drives me crazy is when this isn't filled in, right? There's a reason it's in a box and bold. Okay, this is very important. The day that it gets executed, you got to write it in there. Okay, I'm sure you guys all know that, but it's something that people miss all the time. Is there will be no execution.
Phil?
Yeah.
You're saying that, but I have never filled that in only because it says broker, fill it in. And I've always sent my contracts to my broker for approval. So I've never touched that box ever.
So I'm about to blow your mind.
Okay.
You as a real estate agent, when you sign with a client, who do you represent in that deal?
My client.
Ooh, you represent me, right? All the clients, all of your clients are represented by the broker. Okay. And so you are acting as the broker's representative in this deal.
Oh.
Right. So yeah, you get to fill that in just as the broker.
Okay.
Right. Assuming you're the last one to make a change or whichever, you guys know this already, but whenever the last set of initials or last signature goes on there, whoever that is, it gets filled in by the broker. Okay?
I guess I've also only been a buyer agent, so I'm not the last one. So that also makes sense.
Yeah, but just think of it like that all of the clients are the clients of the broker, right? They're not yours personally. They're not even mine personally. They're the clients of the company. And so you are there filling in this box on behalf of the company, right? Who is the broker.
Okay.
Make sense?
Absolutely.
I always thought it was kind of funny too, how, when you DocuSign it, everything goes after the O. Like it doesn't have the day here.
Oh, yeah.
That's still legal, right?
Yeah, that's just lawyers, liking to write it all pretty like that. But yeah, actually, I think it's, I don't have a copy of it here in front of me, but I think the buyer's rep or maybe the listing agreement has down there as client's initials and broker's initials. And that's you that initials that. You are initialing on behalf of the broker, who is the company. So the three addenda that, and by the way, plural for addendum is addenda. It's not addendums.
I think addendum's better.
The three addenda that I wanted to touch on. This doesn't mean we can't talk about other ones if you guys have questions when we get to the end of this. But the addendum for property subject to mandatory membership in a property owners association is the first one. There's not a ton on here. I mean, it's a one-page addendum, so there's really not a whole lot to go into, but something for you to be aware of. This box number 1 is usually the one that gets checked, and it just basically says that the seller is going to provide the HOA information, HOA documents, and so people will normally just write in a number of days right here, 10, something like that, and then forget about it. Okay, but you got to read the rest of the paragraph. If seller delivers the subdivision information, buyer may terminate the contract within 3 days after buyer receives the subdivision information, or prior to closing, whichever occurs first, and the earnest money will be refunded to buyer. Okay, so if you have this addendum attached to your contract and you're trying to do one of those no option period things, that's not really going to work, because they essentially have an option period, right? If it takes 3 days for which would be really fast, for the HOA, it normally takes 2 weeks for the HOA to get them the seller's subdivision information. Then the buyer has 3 days after they receive the subdivision information to terminate. Okay, so if it takes, let's say it takes 10 days, 3 days on top of that is 13. So your buyer has almost a 2-week option period that they can back out of a deal because of this addendum. Okay, does that make sense? So then the next sentence is even worse. If buyer does not receive the subdivision information, meaning they don't receive it by the, if they don't receive the subdivision information, buyer as buyer's sole remedy may terminate the contract at any time prior to closing, and the earnest money will be refunded to buyer. So if they don't get it at all, then they basically have an option period all the way up until closing. Okay. If they get it, but then it's after the date. So like they had 10 days to get it to you, but they get it to you on the 12th day. Okay, well, at that point, they're probably going to tell you that you need to resort to paragraph 15, meaning you can bail if you want to, or you can try to enforce specific performance. It doesn't spell out in this paragraph what happens if they get it to you, but they don't get it to you in time. So anyway, the thing that we need to be aware of is that this is in here, okay? And it's probably going to last longer than your option period does. All right, and most people don't read this paragraph, and so they don't even know that that's there. Okay, most of the time, how long are you guys seeing for how long it takes homeowner association to get you the subdivision information?
3 weeks.
3 weeks?
Yeah.
Well, that's
It took
why it's
2
so
weeks on our
weird.
last one.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Okay, so
You
it
can
takes
look
2
it
weeks.
up. That's why it's so weird that they can't provide it. I can usually get them subdivision information within 3 seconds if I just Google it.
Yeah, right, because it's on the website. So you need to be riding your title company's ass if you're having them order this for you, and make sure that this gets done on time. And just know in the back of your mind, like, okay, we made it through the option period. That's normally the big hurdle you got to get through, right? Well, there's this other thing. Okay, so know that that's there. All right. What do you got?
Well, I was gonna ask you, since we've had a couple transactions at the Oaks out here, I actually purchased this and on number 55 Oaks. Am I able to use that if we were to have another listing out there?
So
Resale
Yeah, I'm
certificate
not
is
gonna
part of it
advise
too.
that. I'm not going to advise that. Like, you could give it to them just sort of as an FYI. But I would always want to have the subdivision provide that information to the buyers, because if they had an HOA meeting and changed one sentence in those covenants, now your document's out of date. So yeah, like if you want to provide that information to the buyers just as an FYI, that's cool. But I would still have the subdivision provide a copy as well, or come down here at box number 4. If you can get them to check that, buyer does not require delivery of the subdivision information, or even this one, paragraph 3, buyer has received and approved the subdivision information before signing of the contract. One of those two would get you out of the thing that basically grants an option period, but paragraph 3, you'd still be subject to if they made some sort of change, and now the stuff you gave them was out of date, then you'd still be on the hook for it. So if they're willing to check box 4, then we're free and clear.
Okay, thank you.
You're safer having the property owner association deliver them the documents.
In reference to Heather's, or I'm sorry, Megan's comment about looking it up on the internet, you have to have the resale certificate too, which states what they owe and back POA dues or whatever, right? But you're not going to find that on the internet.
First line on the document, subdivision information means 1, a current copy of the restrictions applying to the subdivision bylaws and rules association, which you can find online most of the time, and 2, a resale certificate, all of which are described by section blah blah blah.
Okay, I got a question.
Okay.
I got a listing coming up in January.
Mhm.
If I request these documents, or I have the seller request these documents in January, and we have them available and put them on the listing the day that it goes live, would I be appropriate as a listing agent to say, we're really looking for your seller to check box number 3? Because we've provided them to you and here's the date that we received them.
Yeah, I mean, well, so you're gonna want to check with your title company to find out how long the resale certificate is gonna be acceptable to them. Because remember, like Paul said, we're talking about the
Right,
covenants, codes and restrictions, but we're also talking about the resale certificate.
Right.
So if the buyer, or if you don't have a resale certificate, then you haven't provided the subdivision information yet.
right.
So check with title and make sure that they are willing to accept a resale certificate that is maybe 30 days old or however long. Yeah, and then you'd still be on the hook to make sure that there haven't been any changes since the copy of the documents that you got was done. So if you want to go to that effort and try to stay on top of that, you can. But it's a whole lot easier to check box 1 and then just
True.
stay on top of it. Okay. So skipping to the bottom of this form, unless there are other questions. In D, authorization, this is just something to make your clients aware of. So it used to be that the title companies would order all of these documents for you, and then they would settle up at closing. Because the subdivision charges money to prepare all this stuff. And so the title company would just pay it and then take it out of the proceeds at closing. Well, then when deals started falling apart and people would argue over who was supposed to pay for whatever, it got to where title companies were getting stiffed. And so they didn't want to keep just paying for that. And so they came up with this language right here where it talks about, where's the start of the sentence? The buyer does not require subdivision information or an updated resale certificate, and title company requires information from the association such as the status of dues, assessments, blah, 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 blah. A waiver of any right of first refusal, buyer or seller, you got to check one of the boxes, shall pay the title company the cost of obtaining this information prior to the title company ordering the information. So it's possible that the title company may ask whoever it is that's supposed to be paying for this to pay for it upfront. Okay, that's all that says. Trish, did you have a question?
Yeah, going back up to paragraph A, it says in box number 2 that the buyer can obtain, pay for, and deliver the information to the seller. And if they do that, and for whatever reason the seller, it says it gives them the option, the buyer the option to terminate the contract. But the buyer has that option in box number 1. So why would you ask your buyer to spend that money to get that, pay for that information when they already have that option if the seller doesn't provide it?
So I have never once used this paragraph, but it is possible for the seller to say,
I'm not gonna do it.
I'm not gonna do it. Like, I don't want to pay for it. And so,
I've got one right now.
yeah, they're gonna force the buyer to pay for it themselves. And now the buyer still has the right to terminate.
But that's what I'm saying. If they already have the option to terminate it anyway, in number 1, if they don't get the information from the seller, then it seems.
That's only if you check box number 1. So we got to check 1 only, right? So we're either operating under number 1 or we're operating under number 2. So if we're checking number 2, then 1 doesn't matter.
Okay.
Does that make
No,
sense?
I get what she's saying.
No, but okay.
No, Patricia,
Up to the
I'm with
person in
you.
the contract.
Well, I
Okay.
mean, if I have a buyer and they go to buy a piece of property and they say, okay, seller, give me the information about the subdivision, and the seller says, I don't want to. So then the buyer says, well, I already have an option out there because you're going to check box number 1, seller, right? Seller's going to check box number 1,
No.
right? Or would they check? Why would they check box number 2? They're not going to want to get out of it. I mean, they're going to want to try and get their money either way. So
So if the seller If the seller checks box number 1, then that means they're agreeing to pay for it. And if they don't want to pay for it, then they're going to make you check box number 2
Okay,
or 4.
So Trish, I've got a buyer right now that's buying a property that's owned by a church. And it's the parsonage. And while the sellers are being pretty cool on some things, I could totally see them saying, we're not gonna pay for the HOA documents because we don't have the funds. So you as the buyer are gonna have to pay for them if you want them.
if you want them, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yep. Okay. So that was really all I had, just those couple of things on this document. Know that there is sort of a hidden option period in there. That was really it for that. I did just remember one thing I want to go back to on the contract that I don't think we talked about.
Phil,
About every single thing.
We didn't, and you will appreciate it.
Phil,
Let's see. It's the thing that talks about the seller's disclosure notice.
Oh, I do love this one.
Here's another hidden option period that people screw up all the time. What the hell is a seller disclosure?
Phil, I'm not even on mute.
What's up, Megan?
Well, I was trying to say back to the homeowners association, is it pretty commonplace to just put 50-50? Like if there's dues that haven't been paid or whatever, it's like, you're just gonna split them in half?
Or people will just write in the word half. That's
Well,
another thing that happens a lot.
no, but
Yeah, I mean, that's not unusual. I don't know that it's the you're talking about in paragraph C.
yes. Like
Yeah.
if there are expenses accrued that need to go to the HOA or that have not been paid, like let's say the HOA, dues are
Yeah.
$200 and they hadn't paid them, it's like split it. You get $100, we'll pay $100.
Yeah, but here's the thing. So there is a change to this document since a lot of us went through the contract scores.
Mhm.
They changed it in November of 2020. And
Okay.
now it limits the buyers, you can limit the buyer's exposure.
We're talking about paragraph C right here. Just, sorry, I went back to it.
Yes,
Yeah,
Yes.
so you can limit the buyer's exposure right now. So if there are outstanding association fees, if there's excess and reserves, it used to be much more expansive than it is now. So, and I'd have to pull an old copy to be able to look at the two different versions and really nail down what the difference is between the two. I like this one a lot because I like to look and see what the transfer fees are, which oftentimes, like I do a whole bunch of deals in the same neighborhood, so I've got their HOA documents, I can see what it is. But I like to limit it to that particular amount of the transfer fees. Like I'm gonna pay the transfer fees and anything else that the seller has outstanding, the seller can pay for.
okay,
So it is a little bit different than it used to be. In the last version, it was very common to put half and half, but this one has changed a little bit.
okay, good to know. Well,
So-
that, and we were in a market where, well, I started in a market where
Yeah.
it was like buyers are like, fuck it, I'll pay for everything, I just need the house.
Yeah.
So we were just like 50-50 or I'll get it.
$10,000 in that field if it meant you got the property, yeah.
If you put half and half, or if you put a percentage in that blank, then you're committing your buyer to pay for an amount that you don't know what it is.
It's
right?
arbitrary, okay,
It's probably a couple $100, so who cares, right? But it's just sort of bad practice. Like
Okay.
if you're gonna commit your buyers to pay for something, like you're gonna wanna know what it is.
sure, okay, thanks, Phil.
But is it common, to answer your original question? Yes, happens all the
Okay.
time. Okay, so I meant to talk about this one before and I forgot. This talks about, yeah, right here. This is the seller's disclosure. Seller's disclosure notice pursuant to blah, 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 okay? If you are the listing agent, you need to have number 1 checked right here. okay? Because you're on the ball, you've done your homework, you have already had the seller's disclosure prepared, and you have presented it to buyer before they even sent you this offer, okay? So there's no reason why 7B1 should not be checked, okay? The reason this is important is because if you check 7B2, there's a hidden option period in here, okay? Because nobody ever reads this paragraph. They just check the box and then move on. Within blank days after the effective date of this contract, seller shall deliver the notice to buyer. Okay, so you put 3 days in there, right? So within 3 days, you're gonna have to get this thing. Because I was lazy and I didn't get the seller's disclosure prepared ahead of time. Now I have 3 days to get my sellers to prepare it and then deliver it to buyer. No problem, right? If buyer does not receive the notice, buyer may terminate this contract at any time prior to the closing and the earnest money will be refunded to buyer. Well, that's not a problem because I'm definitely gonna give it to him. Here's where it gets you. If seller delivers the notice, buyer may terminate this contract for any reason within 7 days after the buyer receives the notice or prior to the closing, whichever is first, and the earnest money will be refunded to buyer. So if you take that 3 days to get them the document, now they have 7 days that they can terminate for whatever reason they want. Okay, so you just gave them a 10-day option period. So even though they wrote, part of the reason you picked them was that they said they only needed a 5-day option period. You just granted them a 10-day option period by being lazy and not getting the seller's disclosure notice done ahead of time. Does that make sense? So hidden option periods because people don't read the paragraph.
And I'm gonna throw something in on top of this. Even if the seller's disclosure, our light just ran out of juice.
I look blue.
Now you're blue. Even if the seller's disclosure is attached to the contract and signed, it does not matter. If that box 1 is not checked, box 2 is checked, and the contract is, and the seller's disclosure is attached, they have an automatic 7-day option. It doesn't matter if they waive their option. It doesn't matter if they've done a 3-day option. You've just given them 7 days.
Wouldn't it just be part of our best practices that if we list something like that's done?
Absolutely.
100%.
Every time.
But people don't do it.
Sometimes getting it done, Megan, is if we know it needs done, but convincing your seller that they need to get it done is the hard part.
Yeah,
that's when you gotta be an asshole.
Understand, you're giving them somewhere between 7 and 35 days to be able to walk away from this contract. No harm, no foul. Okay. But if your seller wants to lock somebody in and know that once their house is under contract and the option is over, they're done, this is it.
And maybe this is a good way to scare your sellers into actually doing the document. Like, look, you drag an ass is up to you because ultimately you're the boss, but you are giving your buyers an out.
Right.
By prioritizing,
Or you're opening yourself up to a lawsuit.
Yeah. So, yeah, have your seller's disclosure notices done before you even list it. And then when you get the document, make sure that B1 is checked and not B2.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Laron, are we hurting your head yet?
It's a lot of information.
There's going to be a test at the end of this. You know that, right?
Trish Morrison, because we have 2 Trishes, and not just 2 Trishes, but 2 Trish M's. Trish Morrison, you okay?
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of this is in my class. So you're, I just learned a lot of it, but this is good.
But if they tell you something different, they're wrong and I'm right.
Yeah.
Well, what I think is interesting is listening to Megan's question, because she said she hasn't already listed. She's mainly a buyer's agent so far, and we've only listed. There's different questions that's like, oh, I never thought about that because we haven't been to that side of it yet.
Well, I'm sure
So it's
Megan would rather be a listing agent. Buyers are a pain in the ass.
Yeah, amen.
Understand what you-
Yeah, I love having to explain to a client when I've been a real estate agent for 2 months that they need to pay $50,000 over asking for a property. It was real fun. Had a great time.
Mhm. Okay, so third-party financing addendum. LaRon and Trish Morrison, this is a document that gets attached to damn near any contract that has a loan. So the only time you really wouldn't use this would be cash buyers. Okay, so this is one we use all the time. I'm not going to go into every single little checkbox on here, although I will tell you that the most frequently screwed up things are people will miss checkboxes. Yeah, remember to check the boxes for the ones that you want to use. The couple of things that I want to point out on this one. First sentence, buyer shall, not buyer may, buyer shall apply promptly for all financing described below and make every reasonable effort to obtain approval for the financing. Okay. And that means, yes, you have to turn over your information, and people are like, I'm not giving this lender my tax returns. Yes, you are. So you do have to actually try to get the financing, is what this says up here at the top. Again, for LaRon and Trish Morrison, this is the document that says basically that this is how we're going to try to get financing to be able to buy this property that we just signed a contract on. And if for some reason we can't get it, then we can back out. That's an out so that we will still keep our earnest money. That's what this document's used for. You do have to actually apply for the financing. Okay. So that's something else to tell your, I mean, it would be weird for you to try to buy a house and then refuse to try to get the financing, but that is in it. Okay.
Oh, I've got one.
Go ahead.
Okay, so if you are a listing agent, this has happened to me. If you are a listing agent and you receive this attached to a contract that is an offer that someone is submitting, check their pre-approval and make sure that the interest percentage that is in their pre-approval is smaller than the interest percentage that is in their third party. Otherwise, they have just given themselves an out. Sometimes agents have a number that they just like to use. Like if you know market rates right now are 3.1%, and so you put 3.25% in every contract, but you have a buyer that is using a TSHAC loan, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's a Texas state program that provides down payment assistance. They're great if you have first-time home buyers. TSHAC loans right now, the interest rate is 4.25. So I'm not saying, yeah, Corey's raising his hand. I'm not saying that an agent is going to deliberately put a lower interest rate on here than what their client is pre-approved for. But as a listing agent, we're not doing our due diligence if we don't slow down enough to check those. By the way, TSHAC loans are amazing. Megan, raise your hand.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so even as a buyer agent, when I fill this out, even if I have a pre-approval that says like 2.9 or 3%, I'm still going to put about a 1 to 1.5% addition to that on there, just to say like, well, if interest rates have increased, this much over this short amount of time, we're still protected.
Yeah, I have that conversation with my buyers about, okay, you got pre-approved at 3.1%. If interest rates go up to 3.6%, do you still want to buy this house?
Exactly. Yeah.
They're going to have a number where they don't want to do it anymore.
Okay.
So I try to make sure that I haven't committed them to something here by just filling out a form to try to help them. And it made it to where they're now locked in. Because if they're approved at 3.1 and their numbers no longer make sense at 3.25, there's nothing that says in here that if your interest rate when you lock in is 3.25, you can't close. It just says you don't have to.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, so
Hey,
I have a conversation with my sellers about, or my buyers about, at what point does this no longer make sense for you?
Okay, good to know.
Hey, Jen, you know what I've done on this thing? Because not all of those lender letters are the same or have the same amount of information.
Yeah.
And I will just, because at this point, you're usually talking to the lender or have spoken to them when you're writing the offer. So I just take a snapshot of that and be like, give me the answers to the test so I can get this contract out. Like,
Yeah.
we're on the same side here. Just tell me the answers for the
Yeah.
blank and we're going to get this
You're a
out.
nice lender lady. What numbers do you want me to put in this?
Because it's 11 o'clock on a Sunday night when most contracts are written.
Corey, it's C.
Okay. And we all
It's
use the
C.
same lenders, so yeah.
But make them give you the answer.
Sure.
And then review it with your client.
Okay, so We've only got about 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure we go through the appraisal addendum. So last thing I'm going to mention on this, unless y'all have questions, is understand that there are two types of approval that have to happen. Okay, there's the buyer themselves has to get approved, and then there is the property that has to get approved. Okay, that's this line right here. Approval for financing described above will be deemed to have been obtained when buyer approval and property approval are obtained. Okay, and time is of the essence, right? So you remember that means that these dates actually count. So two things, right? There's the buyer approval. This paragraph talks about what that means. And then there's property approval, okay? And they're different. So where this gets screwed up is under 2A, buyer approval, you plug in a number of days for that, okay? And frequently it's, I've seen as few as 10, I've seen as many as 35. Okay, that's how long the buyer is protected if they personally cannot get approved. So if they get fired, or if they, whatever, they find out that this happened to Jen. She had a client that found out that her ex-husband never took her name off their house. So
Yeah,
she technically already owned a house and couldn't afford to own two. Didn't come up until they started doing their homework. So weird stuff like that comes up. What the number of days that you plug into this blank, that's how long you have to find that out. Okay. Now, when that date comes and goes, like if you put 20 days in here and on the 21st day, you find out that something happens to the property that makes it so the property can't be qualified for the loan, then it doesn't matter that you've exceeded these number of days. Okay, the property approval can last as long as it needs to. Okay, it's just the buyer approval that expires after these days go by. Okay, so the number one thing that we see that that disqualifies the property is going to be appraisal. Okay, if the property doesn't appraise, it doesn't matter if you didn't get the appraisal back within the number of days that you plugged up here under buyer. Okay, because appraisal is property approval, not buyer approval. Make sense? Okay. So unless you guys have questions about that, there's other things I could talk about, but I want to go ahead and get to the appraisal addendum before we're done. This one is a relatively new thing. You guys have probably never known real estate without this addendum, but it's well, right here, the date, it's 2018. Okay, so it hasn't been around forever, and there's still people that are confused on how it works. For LaRon and Trish Morrison, what this does is, like we just talked about, property approval is one way that a buyer can terminate and get out of a contract and get their earnest money back and just walk away. Is if it doesn't appraise for enough. Okay, before you get a loan on something, you have to get an appraisal, and it has to meet value for you to be able to move forward with the financing. And because that's property approval, that lasts as long as you need it to. There's not a number of days on it. So with the market that we're experiencing right now, Megan mentioned it earlier, she's writing contracts for 50 grand over list price just because they laugh at you if you don't do that. Although that has toned down a bit, but it was the Wild West, 8-9 months ago. People almost weren't even accepting contracts unless it had this document attached to it. Okay, what this does is it removes that right for you to terminate based on appraisal. Okay, so if you're buying a house that's 500 grand and you offer 600 grand and it only appraises for 400 grand, then you still got to buy it. Okay.
And for 500 grand.
Yeah, you got to buy it for what you wrote it in for. And the way you do that is that you make up the difference in cash. So if your buyers from California just sold their 1,200 square foot bungalow for $1.5 million, they have the money to do that. But your first time home buyer, firefighter who just graduated from the academy 6 months ago, they don't. So it's really difficult to be a first time home buyer.
Don't call him out like that.
I'm going to throw in here. If you have a first time home buyer who's a firefighter that graduated from the academy 6 months ago, call me. There are ways to work through this.
But they're not included in this
but
plan.
they're not in this document, yeah.
So, real quick, what this document's for. Paragraph 1 is a full waiver. Okay, so if you check that box, that means I don't care if we miss our appraised value by $1 million. Okay, we're not going to be able to terminate the contract. We're going to make up the difference in cash. Okay, that's what that is. Paragraph 2, partial waiver, means if we miss our appraisal by a little bit, then we're going to make up the difference in cash. But if we miss it by a lot, we still want to retain the right to walk away. And so where that breakover point is this paragraph right here. Okay, so if it's a $500,000 house and you offer $550,000, okay, you may want to plug, and you got $100 grand in your pocket, you may want to write $450,000 in this blank. I'm just using made up numbers.
Phil, so our job as realtors at this point is to know the financial status of our clients, to say like, how much cash do you have that you can actually offer at that level, or you need to cap it
that way, or you could put it as you explain what this document means and tell them what's going to happen if you check each box, and educate them on it, and then let them make an informed decision.
Okay.
Tell them that, okay, if we write 475 in here in this blank and it appraises for 475 and you're offering 550, you're on the hook for 75 grand plus closing costs.
Plus
Right.
20% of the remainder.
Plus your down payment. Exactly.
I have a worksheet, Megan. If you end up in a situation where you've got a buyer that wants to do a full or a partial waiver, and they need to understand how much cash are we talking about, I have a worksheet I can send you that will walk them through, okay, basically, like you can say scenario A, this is my purchase price, this is what I'm doing as a partial, this is what my closing costs are gonna be, this is how much I'm gonna owe. So it gives them kind of an estimate of what their cash to close is gonna be in multiple situations.
Okay, cool. Send it over.
Okay, and then last paragraph, this one down here at the bottom is what screws people up, and it's the one that gets used the least frequently. Because yeah, it doesn't really do much for you. What it says, it's an additional right to terminate, just like the box says. And it means that if your buyer is putting down a big down payment, the lender, like let's say you're offering 500 grand for the house, and your down payment is $250,000. So you're putting 50% down. Okay. If your appraisal comes back at 495 instead of 500, your lender's probably still going to make that loan. Okay, because you're putting down 250 grand. Like you're way above it, all the ratios that they need to be able to make this work. Okay, so you technically missed appraisal because you offered 500 and it came back at 495. But the fact that you missed appraisal is not going to torpedo this deal. Okay, if you want to have that right for it to miss, the fact that we missed appraisal means we can back out, even if the lender says, yeah, he's still good with it. Then you can write in that number in here. So if you're offering 500 and by God, you want it to appraise at 500, whether you're offering 250 grand down or not, then you can write that number in here. And it basically takes the lender's ratios out of the equation and makes it a hard number. Okay.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
So how can you, in this market with the appraisals, the way they're going, even begin to anticipate what that date is on there that you would put in, however many days? Like buyer may terminate contract within blank days after the effective date. So that's our date we went under contract. But like your appraisals, I mean, on some, they're coming in 35 days under contract. Like, what do you put there?
35.
It's the same way you figure out your closing date. Like if you put 35 days for closing, I might put 35 days for this.
Okay.
Same type of thing. Like our closing dates are basically a wild ass guess too, because we don't know how long that appraisal is going to take. You're right. And LaRon and Trish, these appraisals in the good old days took like 10 days. Now there are so many deals happening that appraisers are underwater and they're only picking low hanging fruit. Like they're only saying, oh, that's like a really easy one in an established neighborhood that I've done 100 appraisals in already. And they're offering me $1,000 to do it. Yeah, I'll take that one. Right. And so the one where it's a weird neighborhood where nothing sold in the last 18 months and they're only offering 600, that one's going to sit there. Right. Nobody's going to pick that up. And so, yeah, appraisals can take a long time. So Corey's question is, how many dates, how do I know what number of days to put in this blank right here? You kind of don't, right? I would put it all the way out to closing. But realistically, you're never going to use this blank anyway.
I've only had one that I need to use it.
Maybe. Yeah, this would only become a factor if you were having somebody that was putting down a big down payment and wanted to be able to back out if it didn't appraise. But that's unusual. Okay, it's 9:01. I was trying to be done by 9. What questions do y'all have at this point?
Who's gonna stump the chump?
I work with Phil too long, like to know that I can stump him.
Let's see. I'm trying to make it where I'm stopping sharing my screen.
Hey, Phil, I can honestly say, like, I got a phone call while I was on the road yesterday about appraisal waiver. And even though I've been through it and written them and like been held to them and all those things, I felt like I still stuttered through the conversation because it's so fucking complicated. Like it's so like, it's like Pandora's box when you start talking about all that. And I mean, the last conversation I had about it, over the weekend, it was, look, do you have an extra $20,000? No. Then we don't do an appraisal waiver. We don't write. Yeah, if you don't have it, we don't write checks your butt can't cash, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, and that's kind of what that is in essence. But I feel like this is something like if you did an hour one night, because anyone that's in the Austin market has encountered these, whether they're on the listing side or the buyer side, and like they've waned a little bit. I feel like this time of year, but they're going to come back. Like when we hit March and people are going crazy, offering their firstborn for a house, like they're going to come back in, and we got to know how to talk about it with clients.
Yeah.
Because I do still feel dumb.
So 2 things. Number 1, I literally had someone write into a contract that they would offer their firstborn, or they would name their firstborn child after the seller if we would accept their offer. No shit, that actually happened. Number 2, my last 5 buyers have been the only offer. And so this wasn't even a conversation. So I think it depends on who, what price point you're at, where you're at, and if you're in a multiple buyer situation. But my last 5 have not needed an appraisal waiver at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a risky piece of paper though, because even though they're common in the market and they're expecting them when you put an offer in on a house, like if somebody doesn't have the cash and is willing to give it up, like you can't paper and like, I mean, your offers are going to get passed up without an appraisal, especially back up again. So I don't know. I feel like I just want to be able to talk about it like I could talk about everything else, and it's a complicated, subject.
TREC has a great PowerPoint on it that breaks it down really well, and it talks about like it's awesome because it's like 3 or 4 slides. And it talks about you might want to use this box if. Yes. So it's really simple, and I'm going to have Jen blast it out to everybody that's here in this class. It's really, really simple, and I even catch myself having to go back and look at this thing. I mean, it's only 3 boxes, right? You're either waiving it completely, you're waiving it a little bit, or the third one you can ignore. Because it only matters if somebody's putting down a huge down payment and wants to back out. So it's really just those first 2 that you're dealing with. So like I said, I'm going to have her send out that PowerPoint that TREC did, because it's really helpful. What else?
Cool.
I have like just an opinion, statement, I guess. So I came into this business during the chaos that it is. And right when I started, all my buyers were having to go in over asking and signing these appraisal waivers. And the one thing that really helped through every single transaction that we had to go in over asking was letting them know that they're just having to pay a little bit of equity up front. And then going back to your clients and saying, look, you paid for some equity up front, but now here's 3 months later, this is what you paid for your house, and now this is what your house is worth. And it just like solidifies what you told them. And that has helped me tremendously in markets like this, where it's like, why am I paying over asking? It's like, well, not only is inventory low, but you're just paying for a little bit of equity up front because your house is going to be worth, 30% more in 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to frame it. The only thing I would be careful of is we cannot promise our clients
Sure.
that their property is going to increase in value.
Sure.
Because technically we don't know that. I mean, we know that there's a real good chance it's going to. But so yeah, I would just be careful how you word that. So that we're not promising them a return on an investment that we can't actually promise. But yeah, I mean, the idea of paying equity up front, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, especially with your new builds, like my parents bought a house just this past year, and it appraised for 6 digits above what they paid for it, just because it took them a year to build the damn thing. And when they signed the contract, I mean, the market spiked. So yeah, that's not a bad way to frame it. Just be careful. We're not promising.
Well, to me, Phil, it's always just providing data. Like, it's like, well, I'm giving you 6 months of data, and I'm showing you that, like, per your zip code, per your area, per your neighborhood, per these, specifications for your property, these are the trends, and this is what I'm seeing. So it's like I'm providing data, not just saying, like, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, to say like, this is what's happened in the last 90 days in your neighborhood, and we don't know of any reason why that wouldn't continue to happen.
Right.
That's a factual statement.
Right.
Okay, well, y'all asked good questions. Nobody actually got me, but the one of you that got close. When we talked about paragraph 21 and not wanting to put your client's information in there to say, so that they have their email addresses and phone numbers and that sort of thing. All notices from one party to the other must be in writing and are effective when mailed to, hand delivered at, or transmitted by. Can you have the title company accept as someone's actual information an email that you have sent them, like, outside of the contract? Will the title company then deliver notices to that contact information, even though it wasn't in the contract? That doesn't answer the question. I mean, paragraph 21 actually says all notices from one party to the other, meaning the buyer will talk to the seller at this contact information, the seller will talk to the buyer at that contact information. So that doesn't answer that question, but you may be able to get the title company to communicate with buyers and sellers using contact information that you provide outside of the contract and have that be official. I don't know the answer to that one, and I'm going to have to find that out. So Megan, you're going to get you're our winner.
Tequila of your choice, Megan.
Okay.
Yay!
You're going to regret that.
An airline bottle's a bottle.
Ignore him.
So yeah, I will find out the answer to that. Again, the contract says notices from one party to the other. So unless it's in the contract, that's not going to work. But it may work for the title companies to accept as your official, this is where I want my notices sent.
Right.
If you just provide them that information outside of the contract.
Right.
In practice, that's how they do it anyway. Like, if you don't put anything in there, they're just going to send you an email and say, what's the buyer's email address?
Right.
But as far as is that official or not, I don't know. So I will find out.
Thank you.
What other questions do y'all have about the 1 to 4 or any of the addenda that we talked about? They have any
None
questions?
until I write my next one.
Questions, comments, concerns about real estate or life in general?
Life in general feels like it's a very open topic.
Kind of is.
I'll say something, of course, because I always have something to say. I took a 6-hour ethics class with Candy Cook today. And it was pretty neat because just by participating and speaking up and, you know, being loud like I normally am, I got a lead. Another agent from another town was like, I need an agent for my brother in Austin, and you seem like you know your shit. And I was like, I don't, but I got you.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Good for you. Congratulations. Did you get tequila out of it?
What?
Did you get tequila out of that class?
I didn't. I actually, it was started at 9 a.m. So I did not partake in any tequila.
I see everybody downing their drinks. It's like, this is the end of the fun or something.
Mhm.
I do think it's awesome that you guys are having a class where we drink on a Monday night.
Yeah.
Like
That's
normally
how we-
I'd feel bad about myself, but now I feel great. I'm learning.
Well,
Cheers.
most of the people that work for us don't operate on the idea of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We operate on A,
shit.
B, and C. So yeah, there's no such thing as a Monday for us.
Well, we're realtors, right? So there's no such thing as weekends or days or holidays for us either.
Yeah. Well, real quick, do you want to run through what classes we have upcoming?
Yes. Okay, guys, we've got some fun classes that are coming up. And by fun, I mean, you know, get your drinks, but there's going to be a lot of good information. So we're in December already. We're already in December. I'm sorry. In January, we're going to do the same thing, but it's going to be over KV Core back office, which is the new system that we're going to be using for all of our accounting, all of our DAs, much faster DAs. You're not having to ping me and Phil going, hey, I close in like 3 hours and we don't have a DA yet.
Tell LaRon and Trish what a DA is.
LaRon and Trish Morrison, a DA is the document that says that the title company gets to pay you directly.
Your favorite
Instead of
document.
paying us and then waiting for us to pay you. So you want them.
You're about to get money.
Yeah, it's
You get a
money.
DA.
Yeah. So that system will be in January. That should be on almost everybody's calendars already, but I will send an update. That is January 6th. February 2nd, we're doing a first for our group. We will be doing an in-person training for everybody that wants to be in person. It will be at Texas National Title in Buda. For those who would prefer to not make the drive to Buda, because that sounds awful, there will be a web version that is available, so you can zoom in. But for those who show up in person, there will be dinner provided. We will be talking about what you do when you receive the title commitment, because I don't know if y'all realize this, but when the title company sends you the title commitment, there's stuff you're supposed to do with it. And they don't cover it in your new realtor, baby realtor classes. So that'll be February 2nd. And then in March, with a date to be determined, we will be having a super exciting class on septic systems, which I know sounds super lame, but there is a lot of information
Sounds
that you
shitty.
need to know if you are working with buyers or sellers. that have
Literally.
septic systems. So there might be more drinking for that one.
Hey, Paul, that one's going to be Mike White.
Steve.
That was pretty funny, Paul.
Yep. Our instructor is a former firefighter who has professed that number one, he hates Zoom. Number two, he hates computers. Number three, he hates public speaking, but he's willing to come talk to us.
This should be fun.
It's going to be a good time. So that's where we're at so far. I'm working on Q2 education. It will involve also fun and exciting things, but that's Q1 for you guys.
Okay. And obviously each of you gets entered one extra entry in the drawing for the ad campaigns.
I don't
For
know
showing
that
up tonight.
Trish Morrison is around.
So it's a brand new thing we're doing, but quarterly, we're gonna do a drawing for, you get a $500 ad campaign paid for by the company, whatever kind of ads you want to do, whether it's postcards or Facebook ads or whatever.
Or whatever.
So, yeah, there's different reasons why you would get an extra entry into the drawing, and showing up to these is one of them. So we'll plug y'all in for that. Anybody have anything else? All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate y'all showing up to this. I hope everybody at least learned one thing. And if we got multiple things, great. But like I said, I hope you at least walk away with one. And we'll do another one next month.
This is much better than the classes I've been in. So,
It's because we're hilarious.
yeah.
Okay. Well,
Awesome.
I was telling LaRon earlier, but I'll tell you, Trish, your real estate classes teach you how to pass a test. Okay?
Yeah.
Like we'll teach you how to do real estate later.
All right. That's cool.
Learn that from this group.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you
Thank you
so
both.
much.